So you wrote an article for the Orange and Brown Report, 3 areas the defense must improve on to separate themselves from the rest of the NFL. We'll run through all 3 of them here together. Cut down on the penalties is number 1. Number 2, stay stingy in the red zone. And number 3, in-game adjustments. And if we start with that, Jim Schwartz kind of alluded to it, his baseball analogy, the changeup, not always the fastball.
Yeah, and with that being said, like that fastball is going to get a lot of teams out. A lot of teams are not going to be able to handle that fastball. But where do we see the Browns get in trouble last year? When they faced veteran quarterbacks and innovative offensive coordinators who were more than happy to use Schwartz's aggressiveness against him. So you have to come up with wrinkles and pivot points built into your scheme to avoid those scenarios, and they can come from many different areas. You can disguise coverages, formation variation, or you can just blatantly break your own tendencies. Which is the most counterintuitive thing for Schwartz to do is take his foot off the gas. But there's going to be some instances where that might be what's called for, and to be more passive in zone approaches as opposed to always being aggressive, green dog blitzes, things like that. The teams were really exploiting the Browns on, just horizontally and kind of stretching everything out to take advantage of the gaps in coverage. So I think that is an approach they have to address. And it's not going to be every game. There's going to be some games where, really getting after quarterbacks and playing sticky man, that's going to be more than enough to take teams out of it. But there's going to become a couple instances where teams are going to be ready for that, and you have to have a counter for the counter, and that's something they have to do in 2024.
I would agree that red zone, that's important. Their red zone defense actually, it's got to be even a little bit better.
Yeah, well, they gave up opposing offenses scored 71% of the time, scored touchdowns inside the red zone, which was dead last in the league. And just considering how awesome the Browns are between the 20s, for whatever reason, once teams got inside the red zone, they weren't able to keep that same energy up, and they became more porous. And I believe that if you're a tip of the spear defense, that I believe the Browns to be, you got to keep that mentality and be stingy inside the red zone. You got to force teams to three. But this is also an area where the offense could do a great deal to help the defense out. We know the Browns led the NFL in turnovers with 37, and 12 of those opposing offenses were scored touchdowns on. But 5 of those occurred inside the red zone, and those are really hard, quick change scenarios for a defense to be in. You did your job, you got your offense the ball, they turn it over inside the 20, and you're right back on the field. But I do believe this Browns defense is talented enough that they can force teams to three. Now, if you look at the number 1 team in the league, they usually hover just under 40%. If the Browns can get close to that, just given what they do between the 20s, if they can hold teams to 45% success inside the red zone, I would consider that a success.
Yeah, and the other thing is the turnover battle. The defense turned it over, or created turnover. The offense has got to stop turning the ball over.
Yeah.
We looked at, and we've looked at this a couple of times. I think it was the Patriots and the Commanders and the Panthers were the only teams that turned the ball over more than the Browns last 2 years. And that's, I think it's either 68 or 70% of the time, if you win the turnover battle, you win the NFL game.
Yeah, it's the biggest indicator of wins and losses, that in time of possession. So the Browns are good on time of possession and terrible in turnovers last year. They need to figure that out. And I do believe that you'll see a drastic cut down on that, just given the change in offense and philosophy and the fact that the quarterback that's back there doesn't have a history of turning the ball over at an alarming rate. And I know the end of the year was very exciting with Flacco, but we have to admit that it's tough to sustain winning when you're turning the ball over at that kind of clip.